Hey there guys, it's Metro, and today we're going to be making another update in the State of Death Knight series. This time it's going to be hard to live up to the previous video, and I don't think we'll ever see that many changes in one build again for Blood Death Knight. But there are actually some pretty sizable changes, so I definitely feel like it's worth making yet another video in the series today. Alright, so this was, the build came out on the 19th of April, and down below in the description is going to be the Wowhead list of the things that have changed. So a couple of people last time were confused where I was getting this info. It's in the description if you want to follow along, but we're just going to read through it, talk about why some of these can be important, and potentially, you know, what's going to change in the future for Blood. So the first one here is Marrow Rend. The big change here is surrounds you with the barrier, blah, 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 increasing armor by 40% of your strength. That's down from 60%. Now, in the very beginning of the alpha, it was 40%. It was buffed up to 60%. And I believe that has something to do with the way they're dealing with armor nowadays. There's a lot of talk about armor. I see basically a new post on armor pretty much every single day. And I don't really understand it. As a Blood Death Knight, frankly, it doesn't affect me as much as it affects other tanks. But if anybody knows anything more about armor and why maybe this is significant or insignificant, let me know. But all I know is it's been a slight nerf, and I can actually feel it in the dungeons, but in general it doesn't really matter because it's such a passive thing. Next up is Wraithwalk. Nothing actually changed there, just the way things are worded on Wraithwalk, so that's nothing. But now here we get some pretty big ones here. Consumption, this is a pretty big change. We talked a lot about consumption in the last video and in the last few weeks on the alpha here. Strikes all enemy in front of you with a hungering attack that deals 40% of attack power, down from 60%. So in the last build, I was on the fence on whether or not I felt like it was doing more damage than live. Regardless, I think it was doing a little bit more damage than live, and now it's going to probably do a lot less. 40% of attack power again. This is, you know, it doesn't really matter that much in the beginning of the expansion, but by the end, it's going to feel like, you know, you're not going to be doing a lot of damage with it. So these are things to think about. But the most important part about this is that the cooldown has now been changed from 1 minute to 45 seconds. So even though this does a lot less damage, the reason this ability is good is because it's basically a snap full heal when you're fighting a large group of mobs. And if you ever played Blood DK before, obviously you know that the very beginning of combat is the time when you are in the most danger. There's so many times where I go, you know, I ride past mobs, try to grip them all together, and by the time I get Dancing Rune Weapon up, I'm already at like 10% health. Can be very dangerous, and that's the biggest problem I had with Blood DK in the alpha so far, back when things were actually difficult, was, yeah, that snap heal that I needed from consumption. So the fact that it's now only a 45-second CD again, I think that's a lot better, and I think that's the way it should stay. So regardless of how much damage it does, I think this is a net gain for that talent there. And then we have Rune Strike, another very nice change. This is probably the one that I'm liking the most. Strike the target for 60% of attack power, so a buff from 40%, something I was heavily critical of in the previous video, in the previous weeks. The ability just did 0 damage, and it felt kind of stupid. So one way or the other, the fact that it's trending towards doing more damage is nice, but it also has its cooldown reduced by 1 second for every rune you spend, and it generates 1 rune, don't forget. So, man, this is awesome. I think this is probably one of the best changes they could have made to the ability. It's really, it's a really nice ability. It fills in the rotation really well when you're under geared. And even if you use it when, you know, you're well geared later on, don't forget. So let's look at the talent tree. So it's on the same tier as Blood Drinker, which we talked about in the last video a lot, because Blood Drinker is such a strong defense or offensive ability, and it can be a pretty good, you know, self heal. But it uses a rune, and you know, you can't do anything. You can't auto attack. You can't, you know, generate anything else while you're using it. So I don't know, it's a very good damaging ability, but for, like, you know, straight conservative play, I think Rune Strike is the way to go. And now that it does even more damage, that's really nice. But the fact that the cooldown is reduced by 1 second for every rune you spend just plays so well into how Blood Death Knight works, and really makes us just thirst for haste, something that I absolutely love. And, you know, it makes you think about what the spec is going to look like when we're, you know, two tiers in, maybe 3 tiers in, and we have 30+% haste again like we do on live. I think this talent is going to be really, really, really strong by that point. So I'm really excited for that. Also, it says the cooldown changed from 45-second recharge to 1 minute recharge. That also happened. But regardless, you know, the fact that they made it so cooldown reduced by 1 second, that should basically take it right back to 45 seconds. So that's kind of just a counterbalance thing, just so it's not ridiculously overpowered. But I'm telling you, by the time you have high haste, yeah, you're going to have this up pretty frequently. Then the other change was Rune Tap reduces all damage taken by 30 seconds. Down from, no, sorry. Rune Tap now reduces all damage taken by 30% for 4 seconds. So previously it was 40% for 3 seconds. So this is actually, I don't know, I'm not sure how to feel about this. We were talking about this on the live stream the other day. The fact that it says reduces all damage, and you know, it's like a magic, it could reduce magic as well. This is pretty overpowered. Most tanks right now in the alpha really struggle with magic damage. I'd imagine that'll change. You know, they're still iterating. But Blood Death Knight right now, if it went live today, they would be the de facto magic tank. There wouldn't even be anyone close. But it is, you know, it's difficult to use also because anti-magic barrier seems so overpowered. So I don't know. Is it better to, like, if the boss does only magic damage, is it better to absorb more magic damage more frequently, or is it better to have a second ability that can reduce magic damage? I don't know. I'm not really convinced of how these are going to be used in terms of magic damage, but in general, this ability definitely needed to get nerfed. And, you know, that's the fact that it's 1 second longer is pretty nice, but I wonder if that's because of the global cooldown change. I'm not really sure how that ability functions in. I don't think it's changed in that regard, but I'm not really sure on that. Anyway, the other thing to think about here is Red Thirst now finally works, okay? So I've taken it again, and it's actually really nice for 5-mans. I do miss Bone Storm, frankly. Bone Storm is obviously very nice, and I think at this point, like, I've been away from Red Thirst for so long on the alpha here that I'm probably going to just stick with Bone Storm for 5-mans. You know, it's just better to have the DPS. That's the main thing, and now with, you know, how things work on the alpha, like runic power is so sacred, it's really, really valuable to spend that runic power on an ability that's just going to guarantee your survival for 10 seconds. And the fact that it does so much damage is really nice too. But Red Thirst does work again, finally, after how many builds? Like 8 builds now. So I guess that does mean that they're not taking it out. I'm not really sure. Like I've been saying that I thought they were just going to take it out, and that's why it didn't work. But still in the game. We'll see if this stays. I have a feeling that some of these talents will not look this way. That basically 75, 90, and 100. I think we'll see some changes before the alpha or beta or whatever is over, before the game goes live. So that's it. There's also another whatever, the Azeroth trait that's on here. I don't actually know if this is new or if this has been in the game the whole time, but it's something that's on this list. Spell Reaper, when you successfully dispel an effect with Reap Magic, gain 408 absorb for 20 seconds, up from 208 absorb. So one way or the other, I have not interacted with this. I think this must be for maybe the other specs, like the other DK specs, but it does appear that we can get, like if, for example, you know, you look at the Azeroth gear, let's see, I think I have a piece, yeah. So if you look at the Azeroth gear, I could take any of these, despite the fact that none of them would do anything for me. But if one of them did do something for me, it would be very interesting. And that's actually why I love the legendary system right now, because there's a lot of specs that, you know, like I was trying the Unholy Death Knight helm as a Blood Death Knight, and it was actually pretty cool. It worked out pretty well. It's just not better than the ones I currently had. So, for example, that Spell Reaper, if that's like for Unholy or Frost or something like that, or it's on one of these other tiers, I would definitely consider taking that. Because, you know, Reap Magic seems like it's going to be something that's very useful. And the fact that it also grants you a defensive component now seems pretty cool. But we'll see. Azeroth powers, Azeroth gear in general is not something that's been fleshed out well. So anyway, that's everything. If you guys have any questions or any comments about the Blood Death Knight changes this build, let me know. Definitely think the Rune Tap ability change there, that's pretty important. The one that I'm most excited for is Rune Strike, though. That is going to be very interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing what the spec plays like when it's actually geared. So hopefully within the next few weeks, we'll finally be able to start gearing up at max level. And that'll be that. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one.